Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health podcast. And we are very excited today to have one of our favorite guests that we've had multiple times now, the innovative scientist, doctor, and researcher, Dr. Todd Ovokaitys. And if you've been following along our show, I think we've interviewed Dr. Todd, I don't know, probably almost half a dozen times now. We love to get his perspective on any of the series that we do. And he's like on the cutting edge of medicine and in so many ways. I don't even want to just say medicine because he's a medical doctor, but he's also got such a broad scope of being able to tie in innovative approaches to healthcare that are outside of the box. He also incorporates things with the Lemurian choir that we've talked about before with the work he's done with pineal tones. He's done some of the most amazing work with this laser-based interdimensional platform, which has numerous US and international patents granted in the areas of nutraceuticals, agriculture, including cannabis, and especially stem cell biology. I think we're going to dump into some of that work that he's been doing recently with stem cells, which is absolutely amazing. And he also provides training in the area of psycho-emotional medicine, known as mind-body logic, getting at the core root of any condition, physical or psychiatric, that can offer lasting relief. So, Dr. Todd, welcome back to the show again.
Hey, great being on with you guys. Always a pleasure.
And I don't know if there's anything Dr. Todd can't do.
Yeah,
You're also a composer, like you've brought us to tears, as well, like joyful tears through some of the music that you've shared with us. And you're able to dive deep into the metaphysical concept as well. So it's just, I feel like when we talk to you, there's so many aspects of our reality that we're able to dive into.
it's why we've had half a dozen or
Yeah.
more episodes, because we just keep peeling back the layers and seeing whatever is new and going on in the world of Dr. Todd.
Well, there has been a lot of new layers, new developments, exciting things happening. I shared some of that with you before we came on, and it's great to be part of what you're bringing to people, which is a broader view of the really good things that are happening on the planet, so that we can collectively create, as you say, a new Earth.
Well, in line with that, then maybe you can share with us, as we were talking just before we started to record here, we were talking about some of the fascinating work you're doing with stem cell therapy tied with the photoacoustic laser technology that you use. And you're seeing some really amazing things happen with even working with genetic diseases. And I'd love to hear what you're talking about from that point of view and sharing that information with the audience. So I'm going to pass that
And
back
Dr.
over.
Todd, I think you created your time machine. What was it, at the age of 12? So then part of me also wonders, I wonder if Dr. Todd still has that in his closet and he just utilizes that machine like on a nightly basis and travels
Time
to
travels
different.
like 50 years in the future, goes, oh yeah, okay, that's working really well. Let's pull that back
And
and start that up
I
now.
think we're ready for that
Yeah,
now. Let's pull that and implement that.
and puts it back in the closet.
Well, that's a good method, isn't it?
Fabulous. It's working.
Whatever works, whatever works.
It's actually age 10. So great. And I started with lasers at age 8, actually. One of the few eighth graders that could tell you that laser was an acronym for light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation.
I bet you that made you a lot of friends.
I had so few friends then.
How did you, I want to ask, because we've been talking a lot about schooling and homeschooling and deschooling and unschooling. And how was that experience for you moving through school?
That's a really good question. I changed schools when I was in sixth grade, and I decided to get into sports, and that actually kind of socialized me. So I could be more like one of the guys on the basketball court as opposed to the person winning the spelling contests and other types of things. So that was good to actually be more a participant in the full realm of being a social being. And I was really lucky in high school. I went to a small high school in Milwaukee, but I just had the good fortune of having an incredibly good physics teacher, an outstanding math teacher and a really great chemistry teacher. So it was like I had these artisans in those areas you wouldn't ordinarily get in a small school. So that when I went to college, I think I skipped the first 2 terms of calculus and started with multivariable calculus. The training was so good. So that was a great experience. And then it was, I thought, quite a grind when I was undergrad at Northwestern because it was really competitive. 90% of the class was in the top 10% of their graduating class. So it was more intense. And I was really fortunate to apply only after 1.5 years at Northwestern to a program at Johns Hopkins. And I was one of the few people accepted to what they called the 2-5 program. So I spent the next 5 years at Hopkins. The first year was finishing undergrad. And then my second year there, my first year of medical school, counted as my last year of college. So I had a really great year of academic freedom because I was already in medical school, and then was in an amazing school. I love being at Hopkins. It has a great tradition, met amazing people, and I really saw the state of the art of medicine, what it was capable of doing, and also the things where we could go beyond that. And so I've started from, I think, what would be considered the highest level medical education that exists. It's one of the very top few people, typically Harvard and Hopkins vying for the top spot. And with that tradition, I then was able to see how we can go beyond it. So I'm really about the going beyond, which is what we can talk about.
Beautiful.
So yeah, can we jump into some of the work that you've been doing with the stem cells and wherever you want to go with that and whatever you'd like to share? But from what we talked about earlier, it just sounds absolutely next level.
Because this new earth that we're talking about, it's not only what we're striving for in the future. When we speak to you, it's very much here and now, and you're embodying that. So we're excited to share what you've been up to.
I believe all 3 of us, and I expect many of your listeners, are really into this concept of the human potential. What are we capable of being, becoming? What is our full creative capability? What things of beauty, what art, what music, what science, what philosophy can we create? And the work that we're doing with a special type of stem cell that we call a V cell, it has a long name, but I'll call it V cell for short. It's really incredible. I consider it a gift from the one source, really. As I began working in the stem cell arena, stem cells age just like other cells age. So they're a great type of cell to repair and replace things, but if they get older, they only have so much capacity. So in the regenerative world, I thought we really need to figure out a way to take stem cells and make them younger, elongate their telomeres, so that if we give a stem cell, it's going to be a very young stem cell. And then I was really excited when I learned the work being done by an innovative colleague, very courageous person named Dr. Radichak at the University of Louisville in Kentucky, who began to study these cells, first discovered in mice around 2006, and then in people. Then basically every mammalian species that has been studied has this particular type of cell. And the unique characteristic is that these are formed early in gestation. They're pluripotent, which means they can make the 3 primary germ layers, and from there all the other cells derive. So it's a unique type of stem cell, and then it's really designed to be able to become anything and everything that the body might need. It's much safer than embryonic stem cells, which are earlier and are called totipotent. They can make a whole new body, but those do have some medical risks. But once it becomes a V cell or another type of pluripotent stem cell, they just become really versatile. They can become anything. That made them very attractive. And then the amazing thing about them, it's kind of mind-blowing, really, and it's not known why this happens, but they go to sleep when we're born. they go into hibernation. They're like Sleeping Beauty, waiting for the kiss from the handsome prince. And because they're dormant, they're not dividing. And because they're not dividing, their telomeres aren't shortening. They're basically not aging. So no matter how old a person is, this type of stem cell is actually much, much younger biologically than they are, even as young as newborn. And they're not always asleep if there's a big stress. Sometimes they come out of dormancy and will heal an injury or an accident. And awakening from time to time is something that they do, so it's a natural process. So we actually found our source of stem cells, and it's really wild because these cells circulate in our blood, and they're in the bone marrow. And unlike other types of approaches where we use a person's own stem cells, it doesn't really require anything more invasive than drawing blood. Other types of stem cells that might require going through a bone to get bone marrow or doing surgery to get fat and derived cells from that. And these types of cells are even more versatile. We just need to draw blood. And then we can use a special separation technique and literally have a pure population of these powerful stem cells with platelets and plasma and growth factors. And then the art of this laser that we call the song laser, and I can give you that acronym too, the whole thing is an acronym, is that we've done the basic research and published the work that we are able to awaken these cells from their dormancy very quickly and efficiently by applying this low energy special waveform laser. And once they're awakened, we give them back IV, and the V stands for the V of very small. These cells are so small, unlike other types of stem cells that are too big to get through the lung, they can get through the lung and go anywhere in the body. And then the song laser literally sings the song of the stem cells in light. It increases the probability that the stem cells go where a person can most benefit from them. The song stands for a Strachan Ovokaitys node generator. Scott Strachan is the genius physicist from Edinburgh, Scotland, who I worked with to give the specifications, what we wanted to do to re-engineer the way the waves relate to each other. And the waveform relationship is that we're able to align pairs of waves exactly out of phase, so the electric and magnetic fields sum to zero. And if we were putting up slides, I could show the diagram. So basically, instead of two waves coming together to make an amplified wave, that's what lasers do, two waves out of phase sum together, basically into a straight line. And there's much greater depth of penetration. We've had people actually feel the laser going through their brain from one side to the other. And with our latest generation, a person sitting next to them will feel it go through their brain too if they're sensitive. So we know we get a signal much more deeply through tissue than ordinary visible laser, which is limited to about 5 millimeters. And not all the light is canceled. The light that remains, according to my colleague who just defined these things so elegantly, the Strachan part of the song acronym, the visible light that remains, we only cancel a percentage of the visible light, is a type of interference pattern. And I won't get into the concepts of interference, which we could if we were doing a longer physics lecture, but basically it's a concept that if waves are in phase, they construct, but if they're out of phase, they go into a type of wave cancellation, so constructive versus destructive interference. So when many of the waves are canceled, the residual light creates these little islands of light, these beautiful islands that are sparkling through space that can go much deeper through tissue. Scott felt it would be 10 to 20 times deeper than ordinary light, which then allows another type of signal to go deep. So with the Strachan Ovokaitys no generator laser, we are sending a signal that attracts the cells to not only go there, it's an attraction signal. We saw it in our very first experiments at the NIH. It also increases their ability to stick to each other. And when cells stick to each other and they're in the right microchemical environment, that's how the cells know what they need to become. So it's creating replacement cells that are much, much younger than the rest of the cells of the body. And we think it's even more profound than that. We've published a number of articles recently, including a review article about these cells. And we believe they're so early stage that they're not just reversing the age of adult cells, they're even making the stem cell pools in the body younger. So when other types of stem cells are used, they will be overall at a younger biological age. And the usual result of a treatment using the most accurate test of aging, which is the epigenetic DNA methylation biological age test, the first clock being the Horvath clock by an inventor and professor from UCLA called Dr. Stephen Horvath, the first clock being the Horvath clock. He, as an authority, and we've met about this, says this clock is far and away the most accurate in terms of the actual biological age at the DNA level. Telomeres are the other clock, but nobody thought that was only 14% accurate. Using the clock based on his principle, there's his clock and some derivative ones, we find that the usual result of a treatment is being 3 years younger biologically at the DNA level. And we're seeing that with 2 treatments at 6 years younger, and with 4 treatments, it's 12 years younger. So we're seeing biological age reversal at a level that really hasn't been seen in a consistent way before. We even have people now that are even 15 to 18 years younger biologically than their birth date age. And that's only after about 2 years of gathering pre and post-treatment data. And we haven't seen the limit yet. So the basic idea is now it's possible to reset the biological aging clock. So imagine being a 3 years younger version of yourself. And now those 3 years, you can do the things to enhance your capability. You can do the diet, lifestyle, yoga, meditation, fitness training, all the other types of ways that you can improve yourself, including things you do creatively, so that after 3 years of reliving your biological life, you can be an enhanced version of yourself. You can up level, and then you can do it again and up level some more, and do it again and up level some more. That's really the concept of the human potential. If you can stay biologically younger and you actually apply yourself with some discipline, a whole new realm of capabilities and personal potential become open. And that's really what's most exciting, is giving more time in a younger body to explore the full range of what's possible.
It's so in line with what we're talking about here, because I think when people start to hear that, it gets really exciting around what's possible. And I can't help it when you're talking about the way the laser works. When we were talking to Dr. Jerry Tennant just a little while ago, and
Just the last episode.
I think it was just the last episode, yes. And he's been in this field for a long time. I think he's been an avatar in this world. But we were talking about scalar energy, and he was talking about the concept that he feels like literally everything is surrounded in scalar energy. It's all these in this geometry of I think he said a cubocahedron, and that it's all this infinite potential that essentially is there and always available, but we need to know how to ask the right questions and be able to tap into, allow that information to then be expressed. And it makes me think the way you're talking about the laser, it's like you found the right language,
The song.
the song, to actually access the infinite potential. And in this way, looking at, say, stem cells, which are pluripotential cells, can become anything. You've found a way to sort of speak to it and to unlock that potential to then allow it to do what it knows to do best. It's like the body will know where those stem cells then need to go. But it's this neat change in the way that we get to think about health and wellness, and that the answers are all sort of there. And if we can tap in and find ways to connect to it and allow that information to be expressed, then the body just sets up from that point. It's the natural healing ability, I think, starts to kick in. But when you were discussing it, it totally made me think that you've just found a language to be able to allow that infinite potential to be expressed.
So would you like to have a little technical discussion about the concept of the 0 point energy?
Yeah, I would love to hear your understanding of that, and if that technology or if that aspect of 0 point is being used in the work that you're doing too.
And when we're speaking of 0 point, can you clarify, are we speaking about still point, the field? Are these pretty much the same sort, the similar words for the same idea that we're speaking of?
Actually not. There is a level of technical understanding, and I think the terms are used because they're powerful, but not necessarily with what they mean, even from the understanding of conventional physics. So you've probably heard of something called the vacuum energy, and that's a description of the concept around the 0 point energy. And there is a specific way of understanding it that it makes sense why it's 0 point, but not necessarily a still point. However, we arguably create a still point that can create structure potentials within the vacuum to alter the flow of reality. Let's go into the depths of deep space, and the temperature is nearly absolute zero. There may be a handful of hydrogen atoms because it's almost a complete vacuum, or maybe a scattering of other noble gases rarely, but there's essentially literally almost nothing in this pure vacuum of deep space. And we'd look at it and say, well, there's nothing there. And that gets us into the concept of the vacuum energy. Have you heard of what's called a virtual photon?
No.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. This is essential to understanding the concept. According to theory, at every single point, even in the deep vacuum of space, where it appears that there's nothing, from every point in space, there's a seething, volcanic, unthinkably vast eruption of virtual particles, virtual photons. And the characteristic of these virtual photons is that they don't cross a certain threshold for us to see them. And there's actually a formula that it has to exceed a certain product of the energy and time, delta E times delta T, has to exceed a certain value that is conditioned by the very famous Planck's constant. If the combined product of the energy and duration doesn't exceed that threshold, we simply don't perceive it in our reality, but the energy is there. So let's just take a cubic inch of this apparent nothingness and imagine that from every single point, every infinitesimal teeny tiny point in that space, there is this seething eruption of virtual photons called virtual photon flux or virtual particle flux going in all different directions at all different energies, at all different durations. So it's a massive amount of energy. However, because these are randomly generated, even though there's a massive amount of virtual potential energy, that when you sum up the vectors of all of these virtual particles, it sums to zero. And that is the meaning of the 0 point, that the vector sum of this massive amount of virtual photons fluxing in all different directions from every point at the same time, the vector sum is zero. Now, when the calculations are done, if you added the energy of all of these virtual particles in this cubic inch of apparent nothing, and you converted the potential energy into physical energy, And using Einstein's famous equation, E equals mc squared, the quantity of mass that could be created from that cubic inch of nothing would exceed the mass of our entire known universe.
So
So does
is
that,
that just absolute potentiality of what is possible?
that is the massive, nearly infinite potential energy density everywhere throughout the universe. The physical matter and energy we see is the tiniest, most infinitesimal fraction of the total energy that is there. We are living and breathing in a massive sea of energy that we don't see because the vectors sum to zero. All that we see and feel energetically is the tiniest residue where the vectors don't sum to zero.
Dr. Todd, can we still access that even when we can't physically see it?
How do you think masters manifest things out of thin air?
Hmm.
And then the next question would be, at all of that's there, how do we potentiate our ability to be able to access that more at will?
So now you're talking about what would be called mastery of the elements through your mind. That's a whole different kind of training.
I feel like Dr. Todd is going to come with like what are those like my child, you are ready for the next level.
It's like, good job, young Padawan learner.
Yeah.
The force is strong in this one.
Yeah.
You've got the perfect background for this conversation.
Yeah.
Well,
Is there enough benevolence in you to welcome this course?
well, and I ask those questions because it's I mean, I'm familiar with these sort of concepts, but I feel like this is a really important question to ask so that people that are interested, how do we keep being able to fine tune our ability to access this energy? Because I feel like the more that we are capable of being able to access that, I really feel like that's where health resides. That's where, I mean, that's how
And this
we.
is going well beyond The Secret. I feel like The Secret actually got us off to a really poor start because it's kind of basing our reality and what we want based on a very limited, small notion of creating our world based on, just egotistical desires that we have. So what you're speaking of, I feel like just peels away the layers in such a grander way. And it's like, what do we really, really want for our world, for ourselves, for our future?
Right. And let me provide an entry-level answer to your question. So if the entire universe that we see represents a very almost infinitesimally small fraction of the virtual potential energy that is there, then I'll share a theory for fun that the entire created universe that we see is a type of universal holographic construct of the consciousness of all these sentient beings in the universe. That the fields interact in such a way, the consciousness fields create structure potentials in the vacuum of space, so that certain aligned vectors within the vacuum flux actually amplify and creates energy that we can see and feel. And you can consider matter and energy interchangeable. So whether we see it as matter in one form or it's represented as energy in another, it's a representation of the physicalization of this unthinkably dense potential energy that's everywhere. So the vacuum of space seems very different from, say, the earth and our physical bodies, yet even the physicality represents the teeniest, tiniest fraction of what it is. So I will theorize that the collective consciousness of all sentient beings, the consciousness of everything that is any type of consciousness at all, is creating a universal multidimensional holographic grid which condenses reality into the reality that we see. So the act of enhancing personal consciousness is literally contributing not even to the global grid, but to the universal grid. So the biggest thing that we can do for ourselves or others is a process of enhancement of the balance of consciousness. And if enough highly conscious people combine their efforts, that alone, just through the impact on this universal grid, will change reality in extraordinary ways.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I love that that was an entry level
Yeah,
explanation
I was
that
going to
you
say, I don't think
offered.
Dr. Todd's capable of a totally entry level for maybe if you're in like, I don't know, grad school. But on that note, that would segue very much into the work that you're doing with the pineal tones and what's coming up in
Well,
Hawaii.
even as you were talking about song, the acronym song, I thought how beautiful, because you're speaking of this in the world and the realm of medicine, but you're also doing this through pineal tones, in that these sounds will activate us, remind us to return to a place and time where we have greater potential at hand and greater possibilities at hand. And when Jason was asking you or mentioning to you that this is wonderful in the realm of medicine, I thought this is no different than in school, like how we're choosing to raise our children differently, in that we're reminding them that there are different potentials available to them, and there's even the possibility of choice is broadening so much more now.
Mhm. Well, those are beautiful and powerful concepts. And at the individual level, say the masters of the Far East, and one of my favorite set of books, you might have read it, is called The Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. And this was actually published by Baird T. Spalding in 1926. In that era, these 6 little books came out. And it was a group of scientists that went to India just to prove that the shamans and fakirs were just magicians that were creating tricks to influence people and get their money and or whatever power they would have over the people. And they found true masters that would literally sit at a table and they would manifest their meal out of thin air. They did one experiment where they split up and 2 of the scientists were 1,000 miles away, and the master disappeared and showed up 1,000 miles away a few minutes later, and they recorded that. They were proving that these extraordinary phenomena are possible. And there are a variety of masters I've heard about now that will manifest jewelry out of thin air, or will go around and create holy ash they call vibhuti. And you can say, well, maybe they're hiding in their sleeves. Well, when they collect barrels of it, it's kind of hard that much up your sleeve. So these capabilities are intrinsic. And I'll comment on the laser, because when we create the waves that are exactly out of phase, there's no net vector, but we are creating a structured potential in the vacuum of space. There is indeed the potential within having that arrangement, that alignment, that this set of conditioning electric and magnetic field forces that are structured, that we may literally be altering the way that matter is created in that space, where sometimes we see age reversal effects that happen much faster than you would think would be possible. And my theory is that as a person does their homework, as they do meditation, as they do mantras, as they do chanting, as they do breathing exercises, as they do disciplines of mind, body, and being, that the brain comes into a different type of harmonic balance. And the brain itself can be a generator of these waves, these self-canceling waves. The other way of talking about it is as a standing wave. If you pluck a guitar string, you will have this shape. You'll have little nodes that aren't moving, and then you'll have this packet, this set of how far the string will go between the nodes. That's considered a standing wave, and we're creating, in essence, a standing wave of light. And it's structuring things within the nodes, doing that with light. And our brain waves and their structuring can do that too. There's a type of mind map that has studied Zen masters, and there's a particular type of extraordinary waveform, a very balanced pattern of energies that occurs between the hemispheres. So it could well be that the reason that at a high state of development, particularly mastery of mind and consciousness, that the person's being is literally creating standing waveforms that are impressing themselves upon this nearly infinitely dense energy potential and drawing a little bit of it to manifest things out of thin air.
Dr. Todd, I don't think I've ever asked you this before. Do you have children?
My lasers are my babies.
I have a question then as a follow-up to that.
Yeah.
What do you think is most important to bring to our young ones right now that are going through this changing world as we see it?
Well, there's so many ways to answer that question. I mean, the core answer that many teachers have given, it's not for me, is the most important thing is just a loving environment, because the energy of love really supports people to develop in the most profound and benevolent way. That's a basic answer. And I'll say something that may be a little bit provocative. And it's not just for children, it's even for adults. Basically, make a decision neither to be frustrated or disappointed, and enjoy everything as part of the cosmic flow and operate from intentional creation. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Tricky one. Definitely a tricky one to do with the frustration. But we were
constantly having to check in to see that our expectations are not leading the way.
This is such a big one, I think, for parents out there. As I know, when this has been conversations that I've had with myself, if I do find that I get frustrated or disappointed, I think through the practice of doing some of the other stuff that you've talked about, whether it's been meditation or stillness, and just finding a space in there to even question, checking in on what I'm actually feeling and asking why I'm feeling that, because sometimes it can happen so fast before you know it, you're just in a world of frustration or something. So having that space to be able to reflect on it, but it often just comes back to me as sort of what have I set up for them that's not really theirs, and can I then change what I'm putting on them so that they're not going to be held accountable for the same sorts of things that maybe I was growing up and that now I just think are normal.
Yeah, that's a beautiful statement and gets to the next part of the equation. So that was a good lead in to this concept of balanced mind, balanced awareness. And we talked a bit about mind, body, logic, psycho-emotional medicine, getting to the unconscious emotional roots of conditions where the brain is literally creating a condition in the body unconsciously as a special solution of survival to live into the next moment. And we could probably have a whole show to really do justice to these concepts and how they work together. And to have a completely balanced awareness. And there is a challenge, right? Life is designed with things that we have to adapt to and adjust to and maintain our internal balance as best we can. And the part that's the trickiest is the unconscious part. And according to one model of how this works, it's not just our own unresolved unconscious conflicts. And if you listen to Bruce Lipton until we're 7 years old, pretty much anything anyone says from the time we're in the womb to the time we get to a different level of awareness when we're 7, everything that's said is essentially like a hypnotic command, that literally anything that someone hears will be programmed as the reality, unless they're able to become consciously aware of it. So part of this process of being able to calm the mind and be aware and listen to the messages and to create reality in a more profound and powerful and efficient way is also the relief of the inner chatter. And the hardest part to manage is the unconscious part. And I think you made the point, and I think one of the most important points, that to be a fully aware, fully realized person to achieve full potential, it's important that we look at every single belief, every program, every way of thinking, and ask, is it mine? Is this something that I really believe, or is this just something that I absorbed from my parents, the culture, the environment, whatever the sources of information are? And if you can actually look at it and go through your own experience and say, oh, well, that really isn't mine, that's for somewhere else. And you can decide that you still believe that, but then it's yours. Or you can decide that it really isn't yours and what to make it. And I think the more that people do that internal process of reflection, that everything that they believe and do is something that they've looked at consciously and reviewed. And then there are processes that we could discuss if there are unconscious limitations, that there's a method based on what's happening in the body mind to really know in a laser precise way what the unresolved conflict is, ask the right kind of questions, relieve the stress, relieve the part of the brain that literally has these things tucked away in that creates a level of loss of awareness, but also disconnects a part of the brain electrically. So once a process is done to overcome those unconscious things, one can really be much more aware. One can overcome limitations that are related to that area of life, but you also get more of your brain back. And when you have more of your brain back, the great masters probably have essentially all their brain back, and that's why they can do what they do. And that's what enhances the capacity of awareness and, as you say, creating the new reality, in this case, at a global level. And literally every time a person does that, it's not only good for them, it's good for the whole. And the more people that do it collectively, the more we can intentionally create a reality that you can give all sorts of names to. And rather than using those overused names, I would just say to continually create the most amazing reality you can imagine. And ultimately be even more than you could have imagined possible.
I love the picture that when we bring awareness to those areas that maybe weren't aware of prior, that in the healing of that, it's not just that that heals, but you actually now have access to more of yourself. And
Yep.
there's this constant expansion. And then with each one of those, I feel like then we actually are able to access more of the infinite potential that we probably weren't able to in that more contracted state. So there's this constant sort of exploration and newness that keeps evolving as we have the curiosity to keep exploring it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's precisely my framework as well. It's about expansion, up leveling, being able to access more of that potential. And it's individual and collective. And there are like the big pictures and the little pictures, the little steps and the big steps. And that's why it's so great to have the discussion and the exploration. And I believe having the vision of the most incredible future possible makes it more likely not only that it will happen, but I believe it will happen even faster.
Dr. Todd, what is going on 12/12/2024?
12/12/24. Thank you for asking. That is the date of the Aloha Choir on the island of Maui. And what's interesting about the 12s is we had actually planned the final choir about 2 years ago, and then COVID interrupted it. So we're talking about these ways to accelerate, creating this clearing of awareness and having access in a way to more of our brain, more of our deeper potential. And there's an ancient method, which is codes and patterns and overtones and harmonics, a type of series of codes that are really about talking to our DNA, talking to our awareness, clearing the things that no longer serve, and accessing greater parts of ourselves. The name I've given to this ancient method is the pineal toning technique and use of the pineal tones. And we have launched this on the date of the end of the Mayan calendar. The first choir was on December 21st, 2012, when the Mayan calendar had its last page, and some thought that meant the end of the world. There was even a movie about that. And the other interpretation is that it was a decision point. In the cosmologic sense, it was the end of a galactic cycle, which takes 26,000 years. And it's a decision point. Do we go in one direction or another? Do we create a world that is a very dark place to be? Or do we create an extraordinary, enlightened, peaceful planet? It was a decision point. And I believe if there was a collective, there were many people doing many things on that date. And I believe in the collective, we did what was needed so that we ultimately go on this incredible enlightened path trajectory. The first choir that we did on that date, we had over 900 choristers. And this is basically something that was an assignment from Cryon, who is the being that our mutual friend Lee Carroll brings through. And he then instructed me to do choirs on various sacred sites around the world. And at this point, we have activated all 12 of those sacred sites, which each combine with the null. And what we're told for this next choir, which will be the 12th choir of 12 over 12 years on 12/12/24, is it is going to activate this entire planetary grid system as a way to accelerate the clearance of the collective suffering of humanity. And beyond that, it's also very powerful personally. It's about awakening deep internal codes for mastery that have previously been dormant. So it's both a personal and planetary event. And it'll be the final choir of this type. And they're pretty amazing to be in that kind of a sound bath with hundreds of people of high intention. As Cryon said, it's not about the precision of the notes, it's about the precision of intention to create the desired effects. So the Aloha Choir, the final choir of the series of 2012, I believe is going to be an amazing personal vibrational experience. It's a lot more than just music. It's about vibrational patterns that are intended both for regeneration and for expanded awareness. And we actually see significant boost on the Hawkins scale of calibration of consciousness just over the few days of the event. And we are anticipating participants from over 60 countries that will align in this way. And there are a new series of codes that are being created for this choir that will be the most powerful yet. So for anyone interested in doing that, because of COVID, I've actually developed a several part training program to learn the 36 patterns that I've shared so far, each of which has its own intention for enhancing personal ability or regeneration. And either the online course or I'll probably offer a few in-person trainings, which are the most fun, that will be the prerequisite to join the big blowout choir in Maui. Also note, at that time of year, the whales are back in season. It's at the Sheraton Ka'anapali at Black Rock. And the topography of the ocean is such that if you dive under the water and listen, you can hear a symphony of whales too.
That sounds magical. Got chills just listening to you go over that. That sounds amazing. We'll definitely plan to be there, and yeah, that'll be, I'm sure, all sorts of magic for all those who show up and beyond.
Very interesting things happen, uh, both physically and with awareness and things that people remember, how their perception expands. We could talk more about that. I'd actually love to see you there. We've only been together virtually. It'd be fun to have our first in-person meeting.
I know that would be
Yes.
absolutely wonderful. And what a beautiful place to be able to do that. Dr. Todd, in closing here, any final words?
Anything else that you wanted to share?
Really, the admonition, and I think you stated so beautifully with respect to the secret. It was a way to start in this realm of personal empowerment. And I love the way you put it. It's really about having a bigger picture. And I think the admonition would be to start thinking bigger. Like, what is the best thing that you can imagine? And I love the Greg Braden book, The Isaiah Effect. The most powerful prayer is seeing it already done and being grateful for it. And just make it as magnificent as possible and then reset. One thing we didn't discuss was there are tendencies to be stressed in various ways, and that there are methods to clear that, to discharge that, so that for oneself personally, you know, even say interacting with your children and having to give them guidance and being exemplar in certain ways, the day-to-day living, there can be disputes, challenges, and so forth. And also the admonition to pay attention, to do the internal check-in. And if you feel that there is an irritation or imbalance, to do a process to clear it so that you can be as balanced and clear and happy and up leveled and high vibrational and joyful as much as you can.
Mhm. Do you have any suggestions for processes at all?
I've got about 20 I could
I was going to say,
suggest.
which is your favorite
Yeah.
out of them?
Uh, Probably the two easiest. There are many, actually. I'll give you one. It, it's a whole actual protocol, but the essence would be a black stone like obsidian, a process of literally allowing the negativity to discharge into it. It can be really fast, it could be just a minute. And when you feel that the discharge has happened, it's balanced, and then you spend an equal amount of time uh, calling upon whatever source energy you call on it and fill yourself with love, light, and peace. So it's discharged, but once you create the vacuum, it's best to fill it. So there's that. You can stare in a candle without blinking until you start to feel a little tearing. It's a little trick not to blink. And that can happen relatively quickly. So it's the fire element burning it away. And then again, you spend an equal amount of time recharging yourself with the positive light and always give thanks for that experience at the end. And then there's the earth element, and probably the simplest way is just to walk barefoot on the ground or grass. You can also do a mantra. The simplest one is Om. You might have your personal one. So there's the discharge time. It's useful if you want to be specific, whatever the incident is, just see it, feel it, let it pass through, let it release. fill with the positive, be grateful for the experience, and press on in a more balanced way with your day. So those are three of the basic ones.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
There you go, everybody. A few things to practice for the new year. What a great way to kickstart off 2024. And what a beautiful way to finish it off in Maui. Dr. Todd, where can people learn more about the work you're doing? What's the best place to send them?
Sure. For information about our published research and to connect to learn more about the age reversal treatments that we're doing, it's simply drtoddo.com. And I guess you can write that out, so that's easy. There's also a little book about nutraceutical ways to regenerate, a book called Growing Younger, and that can be accessed as a free download on that site. So that would be the first recommendation. And I think this is going to be a year of real magic for the pineal tones. And the URL has been modified slightly to thepinealtones.com. For those that want something to do immediately for biochemical balance and the vibrational enhancement that the laser energy imparts, that we're really talking about these higher dimensional things, there's also the laser enhanced nutritional formulas, which would be gematria.com.
Can you speak a little bit more, just briefly, around gematria? And because I think you actually use your lasers on these products, correct?
The formulas are laser enhanced with this interdimensional 0-point energy influencing time reverse wave attribute. Yes.
So if you want to become a little bit more superhuman like Dr. Todd, check out
Gematria.com.
Right. We have done agricultural research where if we give agricultural nutrients that increase yields and nutrient density, if we laser enhance those formulas, the increase in yield is 3 times as much, and the micronutrients are even 3 times greater than the nutrients alone. So it's about bioavailability, bioactivity, biological results. And then there's a subtle vibrational effect. So it's intended not just as nutrition, but also as an awareness enhancer.
Dr. Todd, do you sell products that would be appropriate for agriculture as well, if people wanted to use them on their farm or in their garden?
Or with animals?
Actually, I have this amazing plant whisperer colleague in Mexico City. He is an artisan of creating the healthiest, most high vibrational information dense plants. We have done basic research and have patents on that, and we're going to be working together to make those kind of products available. We started out with larger scale agriculture, but there could well be a home garden product as well.
Beautiful. More to come.
Next episode coming up. Dr. Todd, it's always an absolute joy speaking with you, and we love hearing where things are at and what you're up to. And thanks so much for making the time to talk to us again.
A great pleasure. Thanks so much. To the best you yet.
Thank you, Dr. Todd.